Welcome to the Cedar Falls regular City Council meeting this December 2nd, 2019. I'll now call this meeting to order. Ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Blanford.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Wieland. Green. Wieland and Green absent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1, is there a motion to approve the regular meeting of November 18th?
So moved. Second.
Been motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Moving on, I do have a proclamation for the Cedar Valley Teddy Bear Roundup Day. It reads in part, whereas the Ancient Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine was founded in 1872 by a group of 13 men belonging to the Masonic Order. It was originally established to provide fun and fellowship for its members. Whereas in 1900, over 80 shrine chapters had been established. The organization continued to grow, and now it has established a presence in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Panama. Whereas best known for their circuses and colorful parades, the Shriners have always been involved in charitable efforts to provide free, specialized pediatric care, vowing in 1919 to establish a Shriners Hospital for crippled children. In the 1960s, burn hospitals were opened. In the 1980s, 3 spinal cord injury rehabilitation centers opened. Presently, there are 22 Shriner hospitals in North America. Whereas Shriners Hospitals for Children rely on the generosity of donors to help provide specialized pediatric care at no charge, conducting innovative research and providing world-class teaching programs for physicians and other healthcare professionals. Whereas Friday, December 13th, has been designated as the 39th annual Cedar Valley Teddy Bear Roundup, I, Jim Brown, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, hereby urge citizens to donate a new bear for children at Shriners Hospitals and to educate themselves on the Shriners philanthropy. Sorry about that, Jerry. New teddy bears can be dropped off between 5:30 and 10 o'clock on Friday the 13th at the Cedar Falls AMVETS Post 49 on Irving Street in Cedar Falls. Signed the 2nd day of December 2019, and Jerry's here to say a few words. Welcome.
How are you all?
Good, thanks.
I want to thank the mayor and the city council and the many, many citizens of the community. It was the biggest that we ever had last year, and that made me feel very, very good. We got a donation in the mail from the shrine. She donated $3,000 to it, so they'll receive a check for $4,500 and some odd dollars from last year. And I think that it's the biggest that we ever had. And I will tell you right now that you're missing out if you don't go to it. It's a wonderful thing, and it's done in memory of my twin brother, who 20 years ago he was crippled, and he wanted to give back to the Shriners something for his crippledness, and he walked again, and it's a wonderful thing. We have a live entertainment and a television, a 53-inch flat TV, give compliments of Cedar Falls Community Credit Union, and I thank Helen for that. And the community has just done wonderful. We got 15 bags of teddy bears last year. It's tremendous. And I want to thank each and every one of you and the community for the great support that they have. And it's just wonderful. So we have a dinner also this year, as in the past, and the cost is $7, and that'll be prepared by Mark and Teddy Winkle, who is co-chairman of the Teddy Bear Roundup, and she does a tremendous job helping with it, and Mark does also. And we have the Hall of Fame, which they'll be picked. It's already been picked, and the Shrines picked the winners of the Hall of Fame, and they don't know it except this year. I had to tell them because they were going out of town. So I had to tell them that they were chosen. And I just urge all of the people, if it's possible, to come and just enjoy yourself. It's dancing with the channel cats afterwards, and it's a wonderful thing. And I'm proud to be associated with it. And as long as I'm able to walk, I'll be there. You can bet your biffy on that.
Thanks, Jerry.
And I thank you, and I'm sorry about Mayor Brown not winning the election, but it's one of the things that life goes on. And just like everything else, life goes on. And I feel good. My health is a little bad, but we're getting that corrected too. And as you see, I live across the street, and you see me sitting there, and I get out every day, go to the Cottonwood Canyon for coffee and lunch or breakfast, and that's wonderful too. I get up, and I live on the 3rd floor, and there's no elevators, and I make it every day. So thanks a million, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate your work with that. Moving on, are there any agenda revisions, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Before we move on, I do have a revision this evening for council and the public. I'd like to turn things over to Fire Chief Bostwick for some updates or for some recognition.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council, I'd just like to give you a little update on a fire that we had on November 22nd. And I'd like to introduce you to a couple of our public safety officers. But first, I'll tell you a little tale. On November 22nd, 2019, Cedar Falls Public Safety responded to the report of a house fire at 8024 Slaptail Trail. Firefighters from both stations on engines 501, 502, and tanker 550, along with public safety officers assigned to police patrol, responded quickly to the call for assistance. En route to the fire, it was reported there was one male still in the house. The first fire vehicle, engine 501, arrived at the scene with Lieutenant John Zolendek and Public Safety Officer Chris Kopp, along with public safety officers. They arrived to find the front of the house heavily involved in fire. Michael Lockard was in front of the house. He stated that his 31-year-old, profoundly handicapped brother was still in the house. He was on the 2nd floor. Michael Lockard had attempted to get his brother, but could not due to the heat and smoke of the fire. Lieutenant Zolendek quickly made his way to the front door while Chris Kopp pulled hose lines up to the house. At the front of the home, Lieutenant Zolendek quickly entered, making his way up the open stairwell to the 2nd floor. Here, Lieutenant Zolendek encountered heavy heat and smoke, with fire dropping down on top of his helmet at the time. At this point, he realized that he would not be able to bring out Johnny Lockard without Johnny being injured. Lieutenant Zolendek retreated to the front yard and had Chris Kopp bring up hand tools and a ladder so that he could go up on the 1st floor roof that led to Johnny's room. Lieutenant Zolendek climbed the ladder, broke out the window, and entered Johnny's room. There he found Johnny Lockard on the floor of the room. And I found out tonight that he was down next to his beloved Thomas the Tank Train model. He was covered up with a blanket. John Zolendek quickly cleared the rest of the glass from the window and laid a blanket over the window. Lieutenant Zolendek moved Johnny to the window, where he lifted Johnny outside to the porch roof. Here, assisted by public safety officers and Blackhawk County Sheriff deputies Joe Schmidt and Nick Smith, they carried Johnny Lockard down to the ground, where Johnny was taken with his brother to the hospital. Following this rescue, Lieutenant Zolendek and Chris Kopp remained on scene of that fire for many more hours, working with a team of public safety officers and volunteer firefighters to fully extinguish the fire. Lieutenant Zolendek is no stranger to stressful and dangerous situations, as he proudly served the United States Marine Corps, where while serving in combat in Al-Anbar province, I said that right? Okay. Of Iraq, he earned the Navy Achievement Medal with Valor for skillfully engaging the enemy while receiving incoming mortar and small arms fire. John Zolendek was also a career firefighter in Winona, Minnesota, previous to coming to Cedar Falls. Mayor and council, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Zolendek and Chris Kopp. Come on up here.
Thank you, Chief. Z?
I think
Chris,
that
thank you.
there might be a couple other people that would like to.
Sure, Lockridge, you're more than welcome if you're going to come up and...
Ken and
Say a
Amy
few
Lockard
things.
lost their house in the fire, but they'd like to say some things, I think.
Sure, thank you, Chief.
Well, I'm sorry I don't have a sport coat. Chief, you stole a lot of my thunder. So first and foremost, we are so grateful to be here, and I want to thank the public safety officers for just miraculous things, and Chris Cobb and John Zolendek. I got to tell you what, you guys are heroes. We arrived shortly after the fire started, and I was able to witness the entire event, and you all should be so incredibly proud of the personal safety officers that we have in this community, and Jeff was out there as well, these guys ran like a well-oiled machine, and they did everything that could have possibly been done, and so this is kind of interesting. The insurance company sent out an investigator. He was there the next afternoon, and he is a 35-year firefighter from Chicago. This guy, it was fun to listen to all of his stories. He has fought every kind of fire that is imaginable, from warehouse to high-rise to homes. And without me asking him about it, I mean, he said, you know what? He said, I looked at this entire situation. He said, I can't help myself. And I look at the job that the firefighters do. He said, because that is my career. He said, there is nothing more that these men and women could have done at your home. And he said, you should be really proud of them and thank them. And that's what we're here to do tonight. And so we are just so grateful to the city of Cedar Falls. We're grateful for our public safety officers and the incredible job that they've done. And I don't know what else to say. John and Chris, thank you both so very, very much.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Thanks, Amy, for coming. Moving on to the agenda this evening, item 2 is a public hearing on a proposal to undertake a public improvement project for the Cedar Heights Drive reconstruction project and to authorize acquisition of private property. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Been motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before we have the public comment, I think we have Matthew Tolan here to describe a little bit about this public hearing.
Thank you. Mayor, council, we're moving forward with the plans to reconstruct Cedar Heights Drive from East Viking Road roundabout to Green Hill Road. The existing 2-lane rural roadway will be replaced with a 3-lane section. An urban section will be updated into an urban section. This project will include improvements to the sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer, and other roadway items. This project includes the replacement of the existing traffic signal at Green Hill Road with a multi-lane roundabout, and after review with our design consultant, a single-lane roundabout at the Huntington Road intersection. Plans for the project show a need for fee title and/or easement acquisitions from approximately 20 properties. Overall, fairly minimal right-of-way acquisition is needed, and I believe Jeremy's panning on the screen right now. Only looking at a permanent acquisition of about 1/4 of an acre, and then the rest will be actually handled through temporary construction easements along the corridor. Iowa law requires this public hearing to authorize the proceedings with this project, including the purchase of this right-of-way.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. I'll now open up for public comment on this public hearing. Hearing and seeing none, I declare the hearing closed. Item 3 is a resolution approving a public improvement for the Cedar Heights Drive reconstruction project and acquiring private property for the project. Is there a motion, please?
So move.
Second.
The motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
Do we get to ask any questions?
You bet. Yep. Feel free.
I'm not sure if anything was left out of my packet or if we just didn't have the information, but I didn't see anything regarding cost comparison or accident data. Generally, aren't we given information as to additional costs that we may have depending on which type of roadway we do?
So we did recently receive an updated traffic analysis report. It wasn't included. Specifically today, we're just looking at the right-of-way acquisition portion of it. We're still in preliminary design moving forward.
But do we know if the preliminary access or the additional roadway, if we're buying more or less than if we did a different type of intersection?
I can probably better address that for you, Susan. What we looked at was the traffic analysis at Huntington Road, and what's shown there is that improvements would need to be made in approximately 5 years. And right now, if we did improvements, if it remained a 3-lane section with a turn lane, we would likely see either a signal or a roundabout in that location. And currently, based on the volumes and what we see from our consultant, that a roundabout would function the best. And that right-of-way is wider there already at Huntington Road. So what we were planning to do at the initial stages with the turn lane is very similar to what a roundabout would take up. So we don't need any additional right-of-way between a signal, a roundabout, and what's proposed initially.
Anything further?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, could Danny put the photo or the picture of the road back up from Huntington to the roundabout on Viking? I've heard a lot in the past about how that feels so unsafe, and are we doing some kind of road improvement? Is it going to be wider or a wider shoulder to give a more sense of security going around that corner?
Yep, so south of the Huntington Road proposed roundabout, we'll be switching that from a 2-lane rural into a boulevard section. So we'll be defining the lanes themselves and separating them out. Also kind of provide some of that traffic calming where you're seeing a tighter restricted roadway and hopefully ease to help reduce some of those speeds in that area.
Very good, thank you.
Anything further from council? It's been motion and second. Requires a roll call vote, please.
Four voting aye, one voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4 is pass ordinance 2958, granting a partial property tax exemption for construction of an industrial use warehouse and production facility upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Been motion second. Anything further from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on is the consent calendar. These items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or the public requests an item to be pulled for such discussion. Any such requests from the council? From the public? I'll now overview the consent calendar. Item 5 is receive and file the committee of the whole minutes of November 18th. Item 6 is receive and file the city council work session minutes of November 18th. 7 is receive and file departmental monthly reports of October. 8 is approve the application of Greenleaf Tobacco and Vapor for a permit. And item 9 is approving applications for permits and licenses. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, please?
So moved.
Second.
Been motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next is the resolution calendar. These items will be acted upon by a roll call vote. Again, on a single motion, unless someone from the council or public requests an item to be pulled. Any such requests from council? From the public? I'll now summarize the resolution calendar. Item 10 is approving and authorizing execution of a service agreement relative to printing. 11 is approving and authorizing execution of a change order for the installation and use of software. 12 is approving and authorizing execution of facility use agreement with the American Red Cross relative to the use of the rec center as a shelter during a disaster emergency. 13 is approving and authorizing execution of an agreement relative to tracking pond merchandise. 14 is approving a claim for non-residential relocation assistance reimbursement in conjunction with the West First Street reconstruction project. 15 is approving the certificate of completion and accepting the work for the West 20th Street Dry Run Creek project. 20 is approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement relative to the West Viking Road construction. Item 17 is a resolution receiving and filing the evaluative report of the P&Z Commission and setting December 16th as a date of public hearing to consider action on a petition requesting the reestablishment of the College Hill SMID. 18, 19, and 20 are resolutions setting December 16th and the date of public hearing for considering entering into an agreement for private developments. And 21 is a resolution setting December 10th as a date of consultation and January 6, 2020 as the date of public hearing on a proposed amendment to the College Hill Urban Renewal Plan. Is there a motion to approve the resolution calendar?
Second.
A motion second. Anything further from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next item, is there a motion to allow bills and payroll?
So moved.
Second.
The motion second. This requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next item, any council referrals this evening? Seeing and hearing none?
We did have a request from Councilman Wheeland, who I don't think could be here this evening. I don't know that it needs referral action, but I know he did request that we place it on the agenda. I think it was an update on the trailer enforcement ordinance that we talked about a couple of months ago. I don't know if Director Olson, if you have any updates that you want to give on that front.
I think at this point, he was communicated with.
I could respond.
Sure, please.
Since I helped draft that change in the ordinance, Dave and I have visited just earlier today. We're going to table his request for referral until we discuss some other options in the language.
Any other referrals from council? Any updates from council? Nothing from staff? Hearing and seeing none, move on to the public forum. Speakers will have one opportunity to speak up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak tonight? Yes, ma'am. State your name and address, please.
Linda Hall, 3917 Beaver Ridge Circle. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. In early October of 2018, the residents of Beaver Hills neighborhood took up a collection to pay to have a rural fire hydrant installed. This was done in the wake of a couple of house fires that had already happened in our neighborhood. Shortly after our hydrant was installed, it was determined that our hydrant was a potential game changer for our neighborhood. The closest city hydrant is approximately 3 miles away near the intersection of Shirley Street and West First Street. The time to drive that distance is at least 8 minutes round trip, plus whatever time it takes to fill a tanker. With the rural hydrant, we could double or even triple tanker fills in the same amount of time it would take to drive and load up at the Shirley Street hydrant. When the Lockhart's house caught fire on the evening of November 22nd, I walked over to the scene. I stood by to see if anyone appeared to be taking advantage of the rural hydrant we had installed approximately a year ago. I didn't see Cedar Falls using the hydrant, so in order to ensure that our hydrant was used, I walked up to Chief Bostwick and asked him if he knew about the fire hydrant just a block away. His response was, and I quote, "Yeah, but we can't use it." As I stood back, I saw tankers arriving from Janesville, New Hartford, and Dyke. What I saw was a well-choreographed group of rural volunteer firefighters fill their tankers with water from our rural hydrant. They lined up one by one, loading up with water and trucking it over to the scene of the fire. It took the rural volunteer fire departments to open the tap and get the water flowing. I challenge our public safety officers here to qualify their decision to not use our rural fire hydrant when they arrived. Why did Cedar Falls not know how to use our rural fire hydrant, but the rural volunteer firefighters did? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything from council comments or questions from the previous speaker?
Can we get some clarification from Chief Olson or Chief Boswick?
Director, do you have any clarification for that?
We did use the hydrant. I'm not aware of the conversation that went between Chief Boswick and Ms. Hall, but we certainly use that hydrant. It flows 300 gallons per minute. We've had it tested. We know where it's located, and we did use it.
Chief?
Yeah, we did use it that night. When I talked to Linda, that was at the very beginning, and at the very beginning of the incident. And I know that at that moment in time, I had just been speaking to Amy Lockard on the phone, or I was about to speak to her. I can't remember which. My mind was really on the rescue. And my quote to her was actually meaning that we could not bring water from that hydrant down to there. We would have to use a tanker. So it was misconstrued. It was misconstrued. But I know we did use that tanker throughout the night. And we flowed quite a bit of water through there. I think we calculated somewhere around 30,000 gallons of water. And we pulled out 300 gallons of water per minute to fill the tanker and then trucked the water down to the scene where we filled portable tanks, siphoned that out, and brought it up into the trucks and ran 3 inch and 3/4 lines and 1 inch or 2.5 inch line.
Very good. Step here for a second, Chief. Anything further from council?
Have I heard something in the past regarding the size of that water main out there and that complicating, or some of our trucks can't use that line because of the pressure?
We cannot hook our truck to it and pump out of it due to rural waters regulations on that.
Sure.
We can put it into our tankers and then truck it to the scene. It's a half a mile, I think, was what we calculated from the scene, from this scene to that. So we would have to truck water no matter what. Sure. From that hydrant. So
still a benefit to the neighborhood.
It did help. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It cut down on some of the travel time. Yeah.
Sure.
Anything further from council? Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Boswick, could you elaborate on the not using a ladder truck for fighting a fire out there?
Well, I know that there's been some questions about whether or not we should have used the ladder truck or not used the ladder truck out there. In order to effectively use that ladder truck, we would have needed to flow quite a bit more water. We would have needed to have a water source that was a lot more credible than that. With flowing 300 gallons of water per minute, as opposed to, we would have to have, just for the ladder truck to run enough water through that and get it onto the fire, we'd probably have to have somewhere around 500 gallons of water per minute at least. Typically, we flow about 1,000 gallons of water per nozzle up on top of that ladder, and there's 2 of them. We can flow one at a time. It takes quite a bit of water just to fill the waterway because it's a 5-inch tube, and the 5-inch tube is 95 feet long. Reaching the ladder from the road to the house would have been an impossible task. I just talked to Corey just a minute ago, and he said it's somewhere around 160 feet from the roadway to the house, so we would not have been able to even reach with a 95-foot ladder to the truck, to the house. If we would have brought it into the driveway, I think if we looked earlier, I think the driveway was about 14 feet wide. If we could have actually made the ladder truck turn and get into the driveway, the ladder truck is somewhere around 18 feet is what it takes to put out outriggers and all that type of stuff. So the outriggers would have been sitting on the grass at that house, and the truck weighs about 60,000 pounds. If we would have turned the ladder from one side or the other, all of that weight would have been pressed on the outrigger that was sitting on the grass that we were actually sinking into in our clothes, our boots and things that we were wearing at the scene. You can imagine 60,000 pounds on an outrigger. Ken Lockhart actually said to me, oh, I know what that is. When we looked at the ladder truck, he said, oh, it's just like a crane that I would use at a construction site. I would never back it down my driveway. It would break my driveway, and I wouldn't be able to work off of either side of it. It would not work. So the ladder truck really was not a possibility at that fire, just due to the sheer size of the ladder truck.
Anything further from council?
It's just
Oh,
a
go
follow-up.
ahead, Mr. Cruz.
So even with the new hydrant that's been added roughly a year ago, the ladder truck's not feasible to be used essentially out of the city limits?
In that area, it's not really something that we would typically use out in that area. It's just, we wouldn't be able to supply the amount of water that we would really need to make that an effective tool. Plus, most of the houses are a good distance from the roadway where you'd need to set that ladder truck up. Typically, I don't recall any fire that we've ever had out in the Beaver Hills area where we've ever taken any one of our ladder trucks, so to use it as a ladder truck.
Okay, if Denny has those photos that I provided, if he's able to show these. This shows the, or John, you can explain.
Okay.
We go page through these. These are the tank system.
Sure, this is what, this actually took place, I think, at a training fire that we had a while back, right, Daryl?
A year ago.
What this is a kind of a typical setup for a tanker shuttle. We have set up 2 tanks, and we have in what would be in the foreground here, you see the one portable tank, what we call a portable tank. People might call it a swimming pool. We fill it up with water from a tanker truck, dumping it in there. Oh, there's a nice picture of that. Our tanker truck dumps the water probably a minute, minute and a half, somewhere in that vicinity. Dumps 1,500 gallons of water out of that truck. And then the large hose that's there siphons that water over into the other tank where the driver of the truck would draft that water, suck that water out like a straw, pulling it into the truck and pumping it out through the different hose lines. That night, Chris Kopp ran 3 inch and 3/4 lines, I believe it was, and 1 2.5-inch hose. Most of the night he ran that. He had to shut down periodically because we would run low on water, so he would shut down the 2.5-inch hose, which ran, obviously with a larger diameter, it takes more hose or more water to fill that hose. So he would shut that line off, and we would work with the 1 inch and 3/4 lines. We had 2 in the front, 1 in the back, which we periodically had to shut down all the lines when we ran out of water.
So then as a follow-up question, if a ladder truck was siphoning off of this, it would, in 90 seconds, it would consume the water coming in on your tanker.
Fairly correct, yeah. I think that's fairly accurate, yeah.
Then everything else would be dry.
And we would not be running any other hose lines if we had that
Right.
running, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Burr.
Also, I guess kind of a follow-up on that, on a rural fire, those portable water tanks, those have to go right beside the pumper truck, is that correct?
They have to go pretty close to it so that we can get that large diameter hose, that hard suction hose, into, it's like a hard straw that you have to put right into that tank in order to be able to suck that water out.
Right.
It has to be there has to be no air in the line, just like in your house. If you had air in the line at your house when you have your plumbing and you do some type of plumbing activity in your house, you have air in the hose or air in the line in your plumbing in your house, you have psh, 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 where it spews out. We have the same problem in the truck. If you get air in that line, you can't suck the water out as effectively.
On the ladder truck, that leg or the support would have been in the way. I forgot what you called it, but
The outrig, what we call is the outriggers, they're like big jacks that you would jack up a car or something like that. They're very large. They're capable of lifting the truck up, so they're very large. But it's a jack, yeah, and they stick out 5 feet from the truck, basically, on either side.
Anything further from council? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone further for public comment this evening? please.
Sharon Reginald, Lilliput Lane. I also would like to speak out on this fire a little bit. I have the fire report, the firehouse report from that scene. It was written by the fire officer who was in charge. This is a document, for those who don't know, it's an official document. It's one that insurance companies often will use and to use for their adjustments and stuff like that. So it is an official document. And it is written by the fire officer who is in charge. I'd like to read a little bit of it to you. So it talks about getting called out to this fire first, which is general stuff. Then the first things that, basically what it does is when the fire officer writes this, they're writing a story, basically the storyline of what happened at the scene. So it said 501, 502, 550 en route to the call. Once en route, 500 called for additional tankers from Janesville and New Hartford. 521, who was our fire chief, en route from his personal residence and asked for additional tanker from Dyke. While en route, 500 was informed by dispatch there's entrapment inside the house. 521 asked for a general alarm callback. 502 arrived on scene first and were informed by neighbors there was a handicapped person on the second floor of the house. Neighbors stated to PSO Zolendek JZ, who I would also like to say did an amazing job rescuing this person from there. And I feel fortunate for that family, for our community, that was able to happen. But it says PSO JZ entered through the front door, went up the stairs and to the right. The neighbors had told him that's where the person's room was. JZ entered through the front door, got up to the first landing of the stairs. Due to the intense heat, smoke, progress was not made any further, and JZ backed out. JZ asked for help from the neighbors, where the neighbors pointed to where it was from the outside and where the male victim was located, which was above the garage area. JZ had PSO cop retrieve a ladder off 502 and brought it up to the garage area and laddered the roof to get into second floor bedroom. JZ broke the window and entered through the bedroom window and observed the bedroom door was closed and the male Vic laying on the floor. JZ picked up the Vic, carried him to the window where a waiting sheriff was on the roof, and JZ handed the male Vic off to the sheriff. JZ climbed back onto the roof out from the bedroom. 501 then arrives on scene. When JZ yelled to 500 to get another ladder off the truck, the second ladder was brought up and laddered the roof, and the second person climbed up the ladder and handed off the male Vic to personnel and carried him down to the ground level and transferred him to paramedics. Then 550 arrives on scene. 550 is our tanker truck with a driver and set up tanker operations. And other support tankers started arriving on scene. After that, 540 and 501 show up with additional PSO staff and firefighters. Nowhere in this official document does it say that there was PSOs on scene that are supposed to be roving around our community and can beat firefighters to the scene first. Nowhere in this report does it say that. It said JZ did all this work. We are putting our own personnel at risk with this program. JZ should not have had to go into that building alone. JZ should not have had to rescue that victim alone. Thank God it all worked out. But we're supposed to have all these people available, and he did it on his own. There was no backup for him. There was no anybody there. The whole rescue took place. There's a sheriff on the roof without being in protective clothing helping out. I'm just thankful we had the turnout we did.
Thank you. Anything from council before the next speaker?
Can I address
Mr. Burr?
Well, she mentioned that there was a general alarm callback. I wondered if you could explain to us, or Jeff or Mr. Bostwick, how the callback works, how many PSOs were on the scene, how many career firefighters were on the scene, or how many came on the callbacks?
Do you know that, Director?
Yeah, yes, I
Okay.
do. So when we do it, in the report also doesn't indicate who came for a callback. It doesn't indicate any of the PSOs on patrol that responded to the call, because I do know, because when I was at the scene, I saw a squad car in front of the fire trucks completely blocked off, which they couldn't leave if they wanted to leave, which indicate that squad car got there before the first fire truck, and it did. And in talking to Chief Boswick, he indicated a second PSO had arrived at the same time at the fire truck did. So we know there was at least 2 PSOs there, one before and one immediately about the same time the fire truck arrived. And others arrived at a similar time. Somebody is always going to arrive first. John Zolendek did arrive in the first fire truck, and they immediately did what they needed to do, and they did it very well. You are going to solicit assistance from anyone you can. In fact, I do know there was another female firefighter from our Department of Public Safety officer that was right at the bottom of the ladder assisting when they were coming down the ladder. That also isn't in the report. So you can't put all those details in a report, because we had over 20 people at that scene after the callback. And so the way the callback works is when a fire supervisor either is en route to the scene or typically arrives at the scene and realizes I need more help, or we're going to be here for a long time, we do a callback. Then a number of people return. They can either go to the fire scene, they can staff another fire truck in case we have another fire call. That way we have another fire truck available, or they can replenish the patrol shift if the public safety officer is going to stay long-term at that fire scene. And so we did do a callback on this particular one. We had one traditional career firefighter return, and I think we had 12 public safety officers return to assist. And I think we had a total of 10, I don't remember, 10 or 12 immediately respond to the scene.
Thank you, Director. Anything else from council? Mr. Miller?
So in terms of the speaker's point that Zolendek shouldn't have been able to go into the fire, whoever gets to that fire first is going to respond accordingly to whatever the situation is, correctly?
Yeah.
Or correct, I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought what they did was exceptional, and he did the exact same thing I think anybody else would have done. He went to take the stairs, go upstairs, couldn't accomplish that task, so went outside and determined how else can we get in? Through the window. That side of the house had no fire damage whatsoever. The entire time you could be on that side of the house and not wear any protective gear. In fact, we had 3 firefighters on that roof for a large majority of that fire activity scene without any masks or air tanks, because it was safe to do that.
Anything further, council? Mr. Cruz?
Director Olson, then at a fire scene, personnel use their own judgment on how they fight the fire, basically, like you're describing, with or without tanks, or how is it determined then?
Well,
Every fire is going to be different.
Yeah.
Wind direction, everything, all that.
Yes, but you have a fire supervisor that's going to be in charge of the scene, and that is the shift supervisor for that day. They're always going to be in charge of that fire scene, and they're going to make those determinations. But when you first arrive at the scene, if that supervisor isn't one of the first arriving, because you have different stations that they're leaving from, the first arriving fire crew is going to have to make a decision as to what they're going to do. And there's typically a acting or designated supervisor at that station that would take charge of the scene until the higher ranking fire supervisors there. In fact, John Zolendek was the supervisor supervising the scene until the fire supervisor, who happened to be a career guy who's been here for 20 years, 10 years as a supervisor.
So there's still a fair bit of discretion in that immediate encounter with the call.
Oh, absolutely. There needs to be, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything further from council? Director, I guess I'm amazed. Each and every scene in Cedar Falls now gets scrutinized. Fears played up. You have video cameras out there if things going wrong. Thank God, again, I think it was a perfect outcome because 3 lives were saved. But is there ever a perfect scene?
Well, I don't know if there's one person's view of perfection may be different than the others, but I got to tell you, we've had, I think, some very, very successful fires. And I hear exactly what you hear. You're lucky this time. Or this went wrong, that went wrong. No, these things didn't go wrong. These people weren't here, and I don't know where they get their information. I think what the homeowner said, that the Chicago firefighter said, says a lot. That the conversation that I had, not with the Chicago firefighter, was that he came in that he had to haul water there. He talked about hauling water and the whole scenario, and he said, I'm surprised that house is still standing. So it does get a little frustrating, but these guys are doing a great job. We've had a lot of success.
Thank you. Anything further from council?
If I may,
Please.
I just for myself, I want to say thanks to these guys, to Boswick, to public safety officers, to the firefighters that are cooperating and working with this program. I think we do an incredible disservice to these guys that step into this community, step into this role, every one of them willing to step into a burning fire to save somebody's life, or step in front of a bullet, or step into any scene. And it's criticism. And prime example of what these guys are willing to do. And not that Zollendek cop, I don't know how long they've been in service in their other careers or in Cedar Falls. That is a basic tenet of what they do for everyone in this community. And, I was going to read this earlier, and if I can, Mayor, I would like to read something here.
Sure.
If I'm hearing this correctly, both from Chief Boswick and from you, Chief, that scene went, I'm never going to say a fire went perfect, but it went well in regards to volunteer firefighters showing up from other communities, in regards to how the scene went, how it operated. I mean, we heard it from the homeowner here earlier. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I read another synopsis of this here this week, and this was out on social media. And I'm going to read it in its entirety first, just so you can get the full picture of what somebody else thought this fire scene was. And then we'll see where we go from there. Excuse me. On Friday, November 22nd at 9:15 p.m., the Cedar Falls Fire Department was dispatched to a house fire in the Beaver Hills neighborhood. At the time of the call, there were 2 PSOs at the 18th and Main Fire Station, 1 captain, a career firefighter, and 3 PSOs were at the Public Safety Building. One of the PSOs at the Public Safety Building had not passed all the requirements to perform the full duties of a firefighter. At the same time as this fire, the high school state football championship was being played at the Unidome. This venue required the commitment of many PSOs. Despite what Public Safety Director Jeff Olson continues to claim, there were no roving PSOs out to respond to the scene before the fire trucks arrived. During this fire, PSOs were not able to help because many of the PSOs were already being used as security at the Dome and were unable to leave. Initially arriving on scene, there was only Engine 502 with 2 people. Engine 501 with 3 personnel and Tanker 550 with 1 person were responding from the Public Safety Building and were several minutes behind Engine 502. While en route to the call, emergency personnel learned that there was a handicapped adult inside the resident who needed to be carried out. PSO John Zollendek arrived on Engine 502 and did an amazing job of rescuing the victim with the assistance of local sheriffs. We are thankful that this individual was rescued successfully. An eyewitness at the fire stated that he was able to walk right past everyone, including Olson and Boswick, because no one had taken command of the scene. He was able to enter the burning home with other neighbors to assist with carrying the property owner's belongings outside. This is very dangerous and should never happen at a fire scene. Only firefighters in their protective clothing should be allowed inside and anywhere near a burning structure. There were no extra PSOs at this scene to act as police officers or provide the needed scene security and control to keep the general public back and out of harm's way. Director Olson, Chief Boswick, City Council, and Mayor Brown continue to claim that we have more firefighters than ever before. They told ISO we have 15 firefighters available around the clock. They've been counting each PSO as both a police officer and a firefighter, which doesn't add up because a PSO clearly cannot be 2 places at the same time. Director Olson and Chief Boswick were in civilian clothing themselves, working very near the fire, handling hose lines and moving ladders. Eyewitnesses say they saw Boswick and a PSO who did not have turnout gear on, but who did have turnout gear on, but no air pack, open a door to the house while the structure was fully involved and look inside. This is extremely dangerous and careless, and as a fire chief, he should know better. There is a risk of smoke and fire coming out of that door. Eyewitness accounts state that there were plenty of firefighters from volunteer departments that had been called to assist with this scene. They could have looked inside the structure while properly dressed for the fire. Neither Olson nor Boswick and the first and second highest ranking officers at the scene took charge of the incident. Resources were left unused as the fire continued to do more damage. Eyewitnesses state that the volunteers from other departments were given no direction at a very chaotic scene. It goes on to talk about the election. My point being, and I'm struggling with this, there's a couple different things here, right? There's an expectation of what service people can expect in Cedar Falls or surrounding communities, and that clearly is very different or not what some people want, I guess. The other side of that is this is out on social media for people to read. And if you read it like I did, it sounds like a completely different fire scene than what we heard from the homeowner, than what we heard from Chief Boswick, what we heard from Chief Olson here. And from what I know of that scene, and I guess I'm glad the document, the official document, was put out there as well, but I can go back through here and Chief, if you'll help me, you know, we can go through and dissect this. There's 10 claims in this that are not true. Put out there on social media. All somebody has to do is scroll through it, and all it takes on social media is one person to like it. It is so very frustrating from my perspective that not factual information gets spread around this community, specifically in regards to this program, and every PSO or every person in the community or in this program that puts themselves in that spot for us, and this is happening out there. They have to go home to their wives and their families and their children and then hear from them that, hey, this is what got said to you out there today. It does a hell of a disservice to these folks. So just walking through this here, Chief, if you would. Or if you've got some comments on it.
Yeah, I wrote down some. I tried to keep up with you here. First indicated that somebody was working that didn't pass the requirements. Well, everybody's passed the requirements. As far as I know, everybody working that day is certified as a firefighter. One has been through our fire training program and is good to go on their own. But we should note that when you hire somebody, day one, they're not ready to go, or day 10 or 20 or 30. You go through a training process. But I think everybody working that night was 100% on board. UNI Dome, people working at the university, they are always off-duty police officers. The Dome hires them and they pay them. So they're not on duty, they're off duty. And I think we only had actually 2 working that night. They share it between the deputies and the troopers and I believe Waterloo. So all our officers working for the city that night were not at the Dome. We clearly had PSOs arrive at that fire scene. We would have probably our CAD calls for service that would indicate who was all at the scene. In fact, I know we track that on every fire, who all goes to the scene initially and then on the callback. Help care, as far as going inside the fire, again, the east side of the house, no flames ever touched the east side of the house. And we had a lot of neighbors, and everybody's thankful that they did do that. Helped empty that, a 3-car garage on that east side, and neighbors were helping empty that 3-car garage. We had some firefighters enter into the home and remove some items out of other parts of the house on that east side only. They talked a little bit about security at the scene. This is outside the city limits, so we don't provide security outside the city limits. That's why the deputies are there. So we can use those for the deputies. As far as the fire chief and I, yeah, we're pretty careful around there. We're not going to get around any smoke or inhale some smoke because we know the hazards of that. But towards the end of the fire, we certainly stepped in the front door to look around, but the fire was pretty much mitigated at that point. As far as Boswick or Olson never taking charge of the scene, the fire supervisor of the day was in charge of that scene. We conferred with him dozens of times throughout the night, but we don't relinquish, we don't take charge from them. We allow them to run that fire scene. That's what they're there for, and we'll certainly do what we can to help. I would like to add that half of that house was untouched by flames, but what I don't think a lot of people realize is that you have a lot of smoke, heat, and water damage that pretty much takes, the basement had no flames in it at all, but you can imagine where that 30,000 gallons of water went. It went through the whole house and into the basement, and that does a significant amount of damage to a home, as much as, or probably more than the flames do themselves. So I hope I hit all those.
You hit most of them. Thank
Hey,
you.
Director Olson, could you also go over the callback? And so you had a number of folks call back, so we had a fire crew staffed at the station.
Yes.
And we also had police dispatched to patrol, is that correct?
Yeah, so we did the callback, and I think we had some in the neighborhood of, I think we had one firefighter and 10 or 11 or 12 PSOs come back. We sent some to the fire scene to help, because if you're going to be that long, you need to take some breaks. We also, I know we had to grab some more air tanks and take them out there and do that type of thing. We replenished the patrol, so we had the patrol officers replenished, with this usually takes place anywhere between 10 and 20, 30 minutes. And then we staffed another fire truck completely in case we have another call that we need to respond to. And I'll just add one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I know there's been some conversations on Facebook about taking that ladder truck and some of the ISO requirements. But once you leave the city limits, the ISO requirements don't necessarily apply, because you don't have the distance between those homes and the fire station makes a big difference in your ISO rating, as well as the water source does. In fact, in the ISO evaluation, 40% of your ISO rating is based upon your water availability, your water supply. And if you think about it, that's 40%. That's how important water is to fighting fires. You need to have a very adequate water source. This hydrant flowed 300 gallons a minute. A lot of our hydrants in town do well over 1,000 gallons per minute.
Thank you, Director. Ms. DeBoer.
Well, I too wanted to commend our staff for a job well done and to simply say thank you for your service.
Thank you. Mr. Cruz, did you have something?
Yes. I guess I wanted to clarify on the Unidome security. Whenever there's football games, they always have the patrol, state patrol typically, and others. Those never in any way affect our patrolling the city and keeping the rest of the city safe. They're extra people doing side work, you might say.
That's exactly what it is. They come in off duty and they're paid by the university.
And then as far as neighbors helping a neighbor salvage things out of the garage, there's nothing illegal. As a firefighter, you can't really prevent that. I mean, obviously, unless
Well, if it was a safety issue, we could, but this was not a safety issue. There was a lot of items in that garage worth a lot of money, and it's great that we got it out. And I've seen it happen at many fire scenes where particularly in the garages, you try to get some items out of there. Again, the flames never hit that side of the house.
Okay.
It's a big house.
And then
If I can jump in here quick, this is a 5,000 square foot house.
Yeah,
Is that
it's
accurate? I mean,
yeah.
just to give some perspective, that's a massive house. And, yeah.
Okay. And then your comment about the water supply, I'm actually looking at a copy of the ISO report, and the portion of the report, the 40%, we as a community tallied up 39.01 out of 40 possible credits for the water supply. So we have a very superior water supply, basically in the city limits. When you get out of the city limits, you have to rely on the tanker shuttling of water, and luckily that worked out.
That's correct, but there are actually some areas within the city that we have to haul water to too that don't have
Sure.
hydrants.
Okay.
Anything further from council? Anyone further for public comment this evening? Yes, please.
Simon Harding, 2238 Sunnyside Circle. Thanks to everyone who put out the fire. I know that this PSO thing gets spun around a lot, and it's tough, I'm sure, from both sides. It really is. But I want to step back for a second and talk about, I can't tell you if it's safer or not safer. I'm not out there. I don't get to see it. I don't get to see a lot of things, but I do talk to a lot of citizens. And I just want to present something that has to do with whether or not the information's accurate, who actually gets to decide about the program. Because at the end of the day, if the people in the city want separate fire and want separate police, whose choice is it? We pay for it. Is it your choice or is it the citizens' choices? So I think the issue is we need to step back and see, you know, whose issue it is, whose choice it is. I think that if the citizens really want this, then maybe we should look at that. Also, possibly the information, making sure that the transparency of the information is out there so people know there is a lot of information coming out from the city and there's a lot of information out come from other sources. People get legitimately confused. So, you know, are we going to have this many firefighters? Are we not? So I think there's a lot of things that we could do, sit down and talk about it and make it better.
Thank you. Anything from council, comments or questions? Previous speaker? Anyone further for public comment this evening? Hearing and seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
In motion second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay? We are adjourned. Thank you.